Good evening, everyone. I am Lisha Duri, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of One on One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Tonight, I'm very pleased to be kicking off the first part of our new series, Developing the Social Sector. The social sector is incredibly important in today's society as it helps to build a more equitable and socially just society. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services in Trinidad and Tobago is headed by the Honorable Minister 𝗗𝗲𝗃𝗲𝗃, and it is mandated with the responsibility for addressing the social challenges of poverty, social inequality, and social exclusion. And what we are proposing to discuss tonight is what is the state of the social sector, what are the challenges it faces, and what more is needed to be done to develop the sector. Just for information, the ministry received an allocation of 5.5 billion for fiscal 2024. So I would like to welcome you, our viewers who have joined us on Zoom and social media, and also members of the media who will be joining us. As usual, we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So we encourage you to raise your hand if you want to make a contribution, and also feel free to leave comments and questions on the chat. I'm very honored to have with me tonight two lovely ladies. I'm still awaiting one, but I will introduce to the audience Mrs. Christine 𝗗𝗏𝗏 who served as a Member of Parliament for 𝗂𝗵𝗏 and Minister of the People and Social Development in the People's Partnership Government. And I am going to say you were one of the most popular ministers in the People's Partnership Government. Right, because I hear about you. I keep hearing about you all the time, although we have never personally met. Christine also served as special advisor to various ministers of the state and also the Prime Minister. And she is now back into active politics as the Director of Elections and Membership of the National Transformation Alliance, the NTA party. So Christine, I want to say welcome to you. We are awaiting Ms. Wendy Francis, who is the president of the Wendy Francis Foundation, which is an NPO that is focused on building and empowering communities through learning, self-development, and humanitarian aid. Wendy is no stranger to our platform. She has sat with us before in her capacity as a local government councillor. She is the former councillor for the electoral district of Felicity Endeavour, and she will be joining us shortly. So Christine, I have no choice but to kick off the panel discussion with you. And I want to refer to a social media post that you would have done in response to the 2024 budget, where you described the budget as, I'm quoting, not only a major deviation from the truth of the state of our nation, but a false sense of security to the most vulnerable. Can you please explain how you came to this assessment?
Sure. Let me say good evening to you, Lisha, and to all those who are on the Zoom this evening. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here to represent the National Transformation Alliance. So I sent out this release, the National Transformation Alliance, and one of the things that we recognize that, first of all, this government is a stranger to the truth. They spoke about, this great economy, this buoyant economy, and that, employment was at an all-time high. And that is furthest from the truth. And it was exactly to say that this whole statement that was made is in fact furthest from the truth, and our nation is in fact in dire straits, and it is as though this government feels that they can tax their way into prosperity, and so because of it, it really gives one a false sense of security, especially the most vulnerable, because when you begin to bring new taxes, you put more burden on the most vulnerable. So that's what I meant by saying that it's a deviation from the truth, and of course it's a false sense of security. I'm not hearing you.
Sorry about that. I forgot to put myself there, right? I want to continue to discuss with you some of the initiatives that were taken specifically aimed at helping the poor and vulnerable. And I want to get your thoughts on these initiatives. So the first being the minimum wage. Now, folks, anyone from the audience, please feel free to jump in. If you want to make a contribution, as I said, feel free to raise your hand, put any questions on the chat. Right, so first of all, the minimum wage. So from January 1st, 2024, the minimum wage will be increased by $3 from $17.50 to $20.50. Do you think that this will be effective at helping the poor and vulnerable?
Not really, you know. First of all, you have to understand that a lot of businesses, because of the introduction of Venezuelans coming in onto the employment, businesses are allowed to hire Venezuelans without paying NIS. You would find that a lot of locals, a lot of persons who are Trinidad and Tobagonians are unable to find employment. So really and truly, as a result of increasing it, it does not really impact upon our locals, because they're not going to benefit from it, because they're not being employed in the first place. And further to that, I don't even think that the Venezuelans will benefit from that as well, because I don't think that they are entitled. The law does not protect them in that regard. So I believe that the government has placed the burden of making the lives of citizens better by placing it on the businesses and say, well, you know, look, we have passed this, so the businesses are responsible for your prosperity, for your development. And in fact, it may not happen. So I think it's again, it comes back to that false sense of security. And of course, you just have persons coming into the workplace and not being able to benefit from anything, because remember, NIS is a buffer. If anything happens to you on the job, you're able to claim benefits, whether it's sickness or injury, you know, workman compensation, maternity, a number of benefits that you can claim. But if it is the employee is not able to contribute, or he is unemployed, then they cannot benefit in any way. So the country loses because there's no contribution to the NIB fund, and the employee loses because he's not going to get the increase, because the jobs are going to those who are outside.
Okay, I see joining us is former Councillor Wendy Francis, President of the Wendy Francis Foundation. Wendy, welcome to our program. It's lovely to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you, Leisha.
Right, we were discussing, and maybe you'd like to just chip in a little bit, the minimum wage increase. I know you're on the ground, you do a lot of work with the poor and the vulnerable of this society, and that is something I've always admired Wendy for. It's one of the things that sort of drew me towards Wendy. So Wendy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the minimum wage going from $17.50 to $20.50, and do you think that will have a positive impact on the lower income earners?
Thank you, Leisha. Good night, everyone. For those of you that are also joining us on all the social media platforms as well. Leisha, thank you for the opportunity to join your program and also share my views as well. And thank you. With regards to what you are asking, in terms of the proposed wage increase by $3, in my humble opinion, I don't think that is something that is sufficient for the general population. And I say that because there are many factors that we need to look at. The current state of affairs, we just came or have been through a global pandemic with COVID-19. And being a former councillor, prior to that, also being on the ground, doing a lot of humanitarian aid, initiatives and so forth, which I continue under my foundation, the Wendy Francis Foundation. I continue to stay in touch with the population, the persons, the families that are on the ground, as you would have mentioned. I continue to do several initiatives. And preparation of food and distribution is something that I do on a weekly basis. So I am very occurrent with market prices and that type of thing, going to the grocery and buying, I mean, general population would normally go to the grocery and purchase their groceries to provide for their families. And what we have seen is a lot of items that are being increased. Take, for example, the market prices, that has really increased a lot. And the average family, whereas they would go with $2 or thereabout to purchase markets on a weekly basis, now you have to go with at least $400 and $500 in order to make a proper purchase in the market. So to say that we have increased, or there is an increase by $3 from $17.50 to $20.50, to say that is an insult is to say is the least, because that when you look at that in proportion to the other increases or proposed increases as well, because market prices, grocery prices are just one factor in terms of food, providing for your family, your children in terms of food. But what about the land tax that is going to be implemented as well, the property tax, and electricity rates? These things would also have a ripple effect. And not only that, but having to provide or pay higher costs for those things such as electricity, it's going to obviously increase prices of other things. So when you're paying for, I think food prices are increased by 47%. I'm not certain. Don't quote me on that figure. I could be wrong. But I believe it was 47%. That's for the raw resource, that is. But when you go to purchase, let's say you have to purchase lunch or you have to purchase from a restaurant, the prices also is going to be increased apart from the food, generally for other items, because of the electricity rates, it's also going to increase. So that $3 really cannot compensate, or it's not in proportion to all these different factors that is going to affect everybody, not just the upper class or the middle class, the lower class. We now have to really look carefully to see if we would even have a differentiation between the lower and middle class. Apart from that, many persons are already, if you look at the employment rate versus the unemployment rate, I would have heard that we had an increase in employment rather than unemployment. But the truth and fact is, many persons and companies went into receivership, but many persons are unemployed and still are unemployed, actively seeking employment. And when you thereby add this further burden on these persons, what is to happen to these, not just persons, but by extension, their families, their children? There are many other items or factors that are also being increased simultaneously. So that's a really, really great burden on the general population of Trinidad and Tobago. I am Alicia.
Yes, Wendy, I want to thank you for that contribution. Now, I felt it important to invite Wendy here today because she is on the ground and she actively does a lot of charitable work to help the poor and the less fortunate. Wendy, something I want to zone in on. I know you do meals every weekend, is it? Is it every weekend you prepare meals, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that project and why do you feel that that was necessary and very much needed?
Sure. Well, prior to going into local government and then going into local government in December 2019 into 2020, there and then we would have seen the rise of COVID-19 in other areas of the world until it was officially declared in Trinidad in 2020. It was inevitable that it was going to Trinidad and Tobago. And being on the ground, I would have had a lot of people reaching out to me, a lot of families, a lot of single parent families as well, reaching out, begging, crying for meals, a basic necessity as food. And my heart really, sank knowing that so many people could not have afforded food. Everyone mostly had to stay at home until the restrictions made it in such a way that you have to stay at home. A lot of people were unemployed. A lot of companies went into receivership and stuff. So when that happened, apart from just staying home and wondering when we had to go back out to work, when we would get an income to purchase food, that type of thing, groceries were closed. A lot of places, you know, and a lot of people were unable to access food. I would have sought the assistance from various commercial entities. A lot of private Good Samaritans also reached out to me, provided aid, to which I then extended to persons in need. So they gave the extensive rise in the need for persons needed that further help and assistance. And at that point in time, everyone was vulnerable. The thing is, moving out over the couple years out of the pandemic, and as restrictions rose, some companies came back on stream with the struggle, and many of them still struggling up until today, and the struggle continues. However, those that went into receivership, they suffered major losses. Persons that were employed with these companies further also suffered, because then they were unable to have an income to provide for themselves and their families. Now, food is just the basic necessity that we are talking about, a major necessity that we need to live. Coming out of that time as well, a lot of parents could not even afford milk for their babies. A lot of single parents as well. So therein lies many issues. And from that, my work continued, because although some persons gained back employment, there were many persons left without a job. Many persons were trying. There were various initiatives I would have embarked on and completed successfully. Take, for instance, how to open your own baking business. I tried to think outside the box, where we could have assisted persons not only to look for a handout, but rather also grow and develop themselves in such a way that they can now provide for themselves and their family. At least try to aid in that area. The famous saying, give a man a fish, but a fisherman may give a man a fish, or teach a person fish. So what I tried to do was actually try to give them a solution, provide an avenue in which they can also help themselves, and something that they can also continue when and if they do receive gainful employment. And that was to set up, some sort of a baking business, where that they can provide their services, provide those items, and gain some sort of an income to help themselves, and I would encourage persons to continue doing so in the times that we are living in now. Long ago, you would think that, we are looking for a job to have one income, and that stable income that we can provide for ourselves and our families. But with the rise and increases rather in food, house, like I say, we're going to have property tax, we're going to have, the increase in electricity, and you cannot even depend on one salary. And now with the minimum wage that they assume that, the general population is going to receive $3, which is really insufficient, and it's really not in proportion with all the a number of other increases, So you're really going to have to look for multiple streams of revenue income.
Okay, thank you.
Isha, I also would like to add to that during the COVID lockdown, you realize the number of parents, how many parents depended on the school feeding program. The children actually received a meal. If they didn't receive a meal at home, they were guaranteed to receive a meal when they went to school. So it showed how critical the school feeding program is.
Yes.
Definitely. Leisha, before we move on, there was one thing I wanted to add to that is that the increase in our the immigrants that came to Trinidad as well. So whereas you would have just to deal with our population, now we have many other persons, bodies, children included, that we have to provide for because they are now part and parcel of our population.
So that brings me to my next point. But before I get on to my next point, I want to welcome Trini, Kazraj, Calvin, Gary, and Barbara. They are here with us every week, and I do appreciate the support, guys. As I said before, you know, we want to make it as interactive as possible. So we are welcoming any comments, any questions, right? There are some other initiatives that would have been presented in the budget. The market box program, for instance, 60 million will be allocated to in 2024 in the first instance for the resumption of the market box program. And also we have the school supplies and book grant. So based on a means test, a school supplies and book grant of $1,000 will be provided to parents of primary and secondary school children to assist with school expenses. Do you all think that these initiatives will really be helpful? Are they sufficient?
Well, while I was a member of parliament, I could tell you that the same persons who received food cards were the persons who were the beneficiaries of these market boxes. So the pool remained small. It did not expand outside of the school feeding program. The other aspect was that sometimes the produce, by the time it came to your office, there was already deterioration had set into some of the food items. But I think more importantly is that a number of these farmers have not been compensated for what was supplied back then. And so as a result of it, I don't know if they would be willing to continue with that program in light of the fact that they have there's still outstanding monies. One. Two, there's the issue of land tenure that is still outstanding. You have the inability to really access the necessary chemicals for the proper supply of your soil. You know, these things have also gone up. So when you have these farmers are faced with all those issues that have not been resolved, and it doesn't seem as though the government has any intentions of resolving them, you wonder whether or not the purposes of assisting persons through these boxes will in fact materialize. You know, there has not been much of a increase to agriculture. Agriculture is the least of this government's concern. You know, to them, agriculture is importation of food. And that cannot be. You know, persons have to be able to be encouraged to grow their own food. Farmers have to be given an incentive. You have to look at 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗲𝗃. They don't look at these things. As a matter of fact, you know, crime is at an all-time high. And that includes 𝗲𝗲𝗃𝗲𝗃. Persons are desperate, and they will go into somebody's farm, and whether they're desperate or not, they are going into the farms and they are in fact removing items that are not even yours. They're stealing it. That's what it's called. It's called stealing. And then they go out into the market. And so the farmers are losing constantly, whether it is from a lack of the ability, because if the land tenure is extremely important, because if you have floods and so forth, you cannot make a claim because the land is not vested in your name, or you haven't received permission to plant. So with you know, the rainy season, thank God it wasn't as bad as has been before, but it still is, because once you lose crop, you lose crop. And if you lose crop and you're not compensated, then how can the farmer now extend credit to a government who is not in fact honoring that credit? So I think it's going to be a backlash. The government can say whatever it is they want. They can make how many promises they want. But the fact is whether it will be materialized at the end of the day. And the pool, as I said, remains the same person. It hasn't extended itself And as I have said before, we have the dwindling middle class, and we have now a working poor, and they are not included. They will not be included because of the fact that the means test, because we spoke about the means test, the means test really supposed to put you in a place you have to identify your home, how many rooms, whether you have a washing machine, whether you have a television. So these conveniences now becomes a hindrance to you being able to pass this means test, because you're considered to be affluent, middle class. So it really works against you. Damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I think that the government is really fooling persons. And furthermore, you spoke about the book grant. The book grant has always been there. It has always been there. It was there in my time. So for them to come out and say, hey, this is book grant, again, it comes back down. The same pool of persons will benefit. It doesn't go outside of that pool. So really and truly, it's only one group of persons that are benefiting, and it's a very small group.
Can you use that interesting term there, the working poor? And I actually read, I think in one of your social media posts, you had also used that term, the working poor. And I meant to make a note to ask you, what do you mean by the working poor?
Well, the working poor, I don't know why it is you work or why anybody else is, anybody else would work, but you work because you want to be able to elevate yourself. You want to be able to own a home. You want to be able to own a car. You want to be able to travel. You want to be able to go out and eat. You want to be able to enjoy life, but the working poor, all they're doing is to work to pay bills. They have to pay, and none of them weren't paying bills before, but there is very little left over to enjoy the fruit of your labor. And when you think about fruit, you think about something good, you think about something to eat, and yet persons are unable to eat and to enjoy, what it is they're working for, because everything is going in, whether it's increased rent because the landlord now has to make up for his increased taxes, or is it increased electricity, whatever increases that would have hit the landlord is passed on to the renter. Your mortgage, the banks are looking to do all sorts of things. So will they increase, the interest rates on mortgages? What it is they plan to do? The vehicles, you have literally removed the foreign used trade. So now a lot of public servants depended upon these affordable vehicles to be able to, enjoy life, to be able to move around, to take their family out. But because of all these things being removed systematically from the system, you find that persons are just literally working to just barely survive. And that is what I mean by the working poor.
Okay, I see Trini has his hand up there. So Trini, I'll allow you to take the mic.
Hi, good night, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I'm gentlemen so far. Welcome, Christine. It's a long time we haven't chatted. And Wendy. I want to expand on two things. First of all, the minimum wage. Minimum wage, the government gave them $3 in addition to the minimum wage. And basically what that amounts to is approximately, if you work it out for a 40-hour week for 4 weeks for the month, it works out to $480 additionally that they will be receiving. But now they will have an increase of approximately 40 to 50% in their electricity rates. They might have increase in water rates. They might have to pay property taxes. And on top of all of that, there will be increases. There will be an automatic inflation on your commodities prices in your groceries. So technically, what the government did is gave them $3, which amounts to roughly $480. And then you would get about $50 or $60 on your electricity bill, another $50 or $60 on your water rate, $200 on your property tax. So and then you, with the inflation on your commodities in your grocery stores, because the supermarket owner is going to increase his prices because he has to pay electricity bills for all those air conditioned units and refrigerators and so on. So they will be spending that same $480 will be spent basically to offset that. So technically, it's giving you with the left hand and taking it back with the right hand. Another thing that we see with the minimum wage, who are the people who get minimum wages? 90% of them are the people who work in the KFCs and the price mats, the people you see pushing trolleys and packing shelves in Massey stores and so on. The menial workers in these conglomerates, they are the people who in these stores and so on. These are the people who work for minimum wages. Construction workers work for a little more than minimum wages. Experienced people, welders and masons and so on, they work for more than minimum wages. So technically, they are helping some of their voter banks who work for the menial wages, in these conglomerates, some of their financiers. Coming to this aspect that Christine just spoke about there, remind me of it again. I forgot.
Working poor?
Excuse me?
The working poor?
No, what was the last topic you just spoke about?
We were speaking about agriculture.
All right, the food baskets, right?
Yeah.
The food baskets. The government touted a large figure, which sounds to be a large figure, $60 million being allocated to the food basket program. Now that is $60 million for the year. If you work out that $60 million for the year and you do the division for the 12 months and how many food bags they're going to be sharing, it works out to approximately, and you work it out for, let's say, equal distribution per constituencies, and there are 41 constituencies, it works out to approximately 609 food bags per constituency. So for every 30,000 people, every month, they are going to share 609 food bags in each constituency. Is that helping the poor? How is that helping the poor? How many poor people do we have in each constituency? TNTech, when they did their RIC surveys, TNTech told us in Tobago, from the RIC, they told us that they assume from their use of electricity, their billing cycles, they have found out, they announced that there are at least 300,000 people, consumers, homes, households, who are below the poverty line, who they consider as vulnerable citizens, who they will be giving rebates to for electricity. If there are 300,000 people and your 60,000 is only allocating food bags for roughly 150 to 200,000 people, it means you're still going to have at least 100,000 to 150,000 poor people who are still below the breadline. The minimum wage at $20.50 per hour works out to be $3,200, a little over $3,200 per month. How many of us can survive with a family of, let's say, 4 people, 2 parents and 2 children, with $3,200, paying rent, which is approximately $1,500 to $2,000 a month, paying rent in a normal home, paying electricity, and so on. It's impossible for poor people to survive in Trinidad and Tobago, and we fail to see that. And the government fails to see that, and they're fooling us with their budget with these large numbers, which mean nothing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that contribution, Trini. So that brings me to my next question, right? Do you think that now is the time to implement property tax and increase electricity rates? Gary will take you after this question, right? So the question is, do you think now is the time to implement property tax and increase electricity rates? Anyone?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And Wendy, what would you say about that?
Definitely not as well. I wanted to contribute a little bit also on the food box, as that also would have an impact, so just to track back on the food box, right? Some of the things I want to commend Christine and Trinity DeBoon for their analysis, a very detailed analysis by Trinity DeBoon as well. I like that. However, with the food box, while I appreciate it and I could see some persons may benefit, however, I think there are a lot of pertinent factors that they must look at or that they need to consider. Take, for example, they need to provide greater support for our existing or subsistent farmers, the farmers in the rural areas, to ensure that they too are part of the program, because rather than focus on importing some of these items to put in the food box, what about our farmers? What about placing emphasis and focus on our farmers to ensure that they become part of that food box program that can then be extended to our population, and thereby we invest in our population as well, rather than bringing in those products and our money is going out for purchase of those items, and that will be a sense of also encouragement for our farmers as well, because I don't believe a lot of farmers are being able to participate or capitalize on that particular initiative, and that will be a detriment to us and our agricultural sector. It has to be something that is more sustainable in that sense as well. That contribution with regards to placing that emphasis on our existing farmers and our farmers in the rural areas, make it a little more sustainable for them. So therefore, a more sustainable program is required for that particular initiative altogether. Also, help those farmers to grow. By doing that, you would help those farmers to grow from small and medium from small to medium size, or from medium to larger. That way we invest in our own farmers and our agricultural sector. So while we look at that 60 million being invested in the market box, we need to really invest not only in the market box, but also in our agricultural sector and our farmers. And while that is being said, there are a number of factors that affect our farmers that they are very disenchanted about. Take, for example, the water. I would have heard Trinity Boone made mention about the water, electricity rates. Christine would have mentioned larceny. Now, these are real issues facing our farmers. I have been hearing these for over the years, and nothing, to me, I have seen nothing, because I am very much, as mentioned before, in touch with our people on the ground, with the farmers and so forth. Also in my engagement with the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago as well. And a lot of farmers, they don't feel that the government is placing any emphasis on agriculture or on what they do, farming, to provide that food security for our nation. I would make reference to simple things like infrastructure, roadways. It is years now I have been lobbying for the Randy Carter Bridge to be reconstructed. Prior to it being collapsed completely, I would have lobbied for some assistance, and to date nothing is being done. Therefore, that access for farmers to reach their crops, their produce, to even plant, it is difficult for them. So when you add this added burden, now you're taking away from them by not engaging them in this food box program. What is to become of our agricultural sector? What is to become of our citizens of our country? What about food security for our people? So therefore, that also would contribute towards the rise in prices. Apart from, let's say, we look at the weather conditions with the heat and with the rainy seasons and flooding, because even if we were to look at flooding, I recall reaching out to the ministry and so forth to assist with, the drains and those type of things. And those things are not being done in a timely manner, or even at all in some areas. So if we look at our the area here in 𝗻𝐵𝐿𝐴city, along that Randy Carter area, where a lot of farmers, their crops they produce will be flooded because the irrigation drains are not being cleaned, and some of that fall under the purview of the ministry, and nothing is being done. Although some of these access routes are blocked, we still have that predial larceny on a high rise. So coupled with all of the other factors and issues raised, they then have to face their crops being stolen, some of them being abused or attacked in their farms. these are real issues that are facing our farmers. So these are things that the government also need to take into consideration, not only just investing 60 million in a market box that we don't know where the produce is going to really come from and who is really going to benefit from that market box.
Well, I think now is a good time for me to make a plug for our Agriculture Here and Now series, which we would have started last week with the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago. And I am seeing Mr. Donnie Rogers on the Zoom here with us. Donnie is in fact a director of the Agricultural Society of Trinidad and Tobago, and he was one of our panelists on last week's program. So Gary, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to allow you to take the mic.
Good evening, everyone. I see two lovely ladies on board here tonight with some very good discussion. One I do know personally. Our former Minister of Social Development and Family Services, Ms. 𝗗𝗲𝗃𝗏, worked closely with assisting me with citizens stranded overseas and getting food supplies, and those returning home getting help and food supplies. So there were so many things behind the scenes, bringing on board people from across the Caribbean and overseas on board to assist us via the missionary channels. So that we have a long history behind with both of us. I would also like to welcome Ms. Francis. I have seen her. I am very impressed with what I'm hearing. You didn't run for election this year, right? In this
No,
local?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. So I was kind of wondering because I didn't see your name. But I want to really commend you on the work that you're doing, and I think connecting with Christine is, it would make a good impact with both of you being in touch with each other. I was impressed to see that. Yes, the agricultural industry has been, far as I'm concerned, discriminated against with resources and not really given the kind of help for the infrastructure itself. Because if we were to invest in infrastructure where the farmers are, we would minimize a lot of the flooding and save a lot of money. And the government seems to refuse, and no matter what we say, and how hard we try, the farmers are not getting the assistance necessary, and the money that is allocated is disappeared into, I guess, maybe their associates and friends. I don't know how it's distributed. I've heard stories of people getting land and not planting either, too, because they were associated with certain people. But this is something has to be reiterated among the citizenry, because they have to realize that the dependency they have on the farmers, for food supply. I strongly believe that if we create a mass production of food, we can at least feed our people and not face that much of a challenge with what's happening on the outside world, because we have our own supply of food. We need to work harder and be more committed to that. So I am calling for a lot of mobilization behind our farmers, because it's in all our best interests that they succeed. So these are the things I would like to say. And I'm happy to hear Donnie Rogers is back on tonight with us here listening. He made a very good impression, and I want to do everything that we should do everything to support him in his efforts.
Okay, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm just doing a quick time check, and it is now 8:43. So we are entering the last few minutes for questions, for any contributions, right? I must say that based on the discussions that we've had so far, you cannot have a discussion on any topic in Trinidad without two things coming up. One is agriculture, and that is related to the high price of food that we face. And the other topic is crime. And those two things are central to almost everything else that you try to have a discussion about. So I want to move on now to a question. Well, I guess I will pose this question for Christine, because I know she has written on it. And this has to do with the national insurance. And the national insurance is important because it is supposed to, and I'm quoting exactly what is written on the website for the NIB, provide citizens protection against the economic and social distress that they may face. Now, it seems as though NIB itself is facing some distress, right? Because they seem to be having reduced contributions and a very large debt owed by the state. And they are making proposals to increase the retirement age to 65 and also increase the contribution rate that employers and employees have to pay. So, Christine, what are your thoughts on this situation with NIB and the proposed increase to the retirement age to 65, as well as the increased contributions they are requesting or proposing?
Alicia, it's one thing to increase the retirement age. It's another thing to receive your benefits when you reach that age. And the truth is, I don't know if anyone will receive it, because of the fact there is a reduction in contributions, as I indicated earlier, with businesses hiring Venezuelans who are not mandated to contribute towards the NIB scheme. It means that there's a further deficit in the amount of monies that have been collected at the end of the month. And so there's a very serious, a very grave concern as to whether you reduce the amount of monies that person can actually receive if they chose to retire at 60 or onwards, whether they will get a 30% reduction as opposed to taking at 65 and getting 100% of your contributions. The truth is, with it being so severely reduced, whether persons in fact would get their monies. And there's something that NIB normally sends out every so often, and I would encourage persons to do this. They indicate that you should come in and make sure that your contributions, your statement is updated. And I think that persons should go in, as the ad suggests, and get your statement to ensure that it's updated. Because if not, you can now go to your employer and indicate my contributions have not been made, particularly if I have a statement that says that I contributed my 1/3. Furthermore, I think that that the NIB should go after these ministries, such as public utilities and all these other state agencies who have monies outstanding, and ensure that they pay it. They should be held accountable and liable to pay these monies along with the fines. This is if you as a business person withhold anyone's contribution, you are liable to be fined. And I don't understand how these things could make the newspapers and there is no accountability. As a matter of fact, a minister allegedly made a statement. There's a statute, of limitation or whatever it is, regarding the contribution. There's none whatsoever. If that were the case, how many businesses would not submit their contributions, but they're held liable and they're charged a 50% fee, and it goes on every month. If these ministries and state agencies were made to account and to pay what is in fact due, then it would alleviate a lot of problems that are taking place. And also, this problem started with Mr. Hart, when he took monies and arbitrarily invested into ghost projects, and he should be held accountable and he should be made to put back the monies. So you're trying to make citizens pay for somebody else's wrongdoing. Why should that be? So I think that the whole aspect of coming to age 65, persons, if they want persons to wait until 65, they must be assured that at age 65, I will get my contributions. And in order to do that, persons need to go and do as the ad says and ensure that your statements are up to date and protect your interests. The onus must be on us to protect our interests. And if it is that you see that your statement does not show it, then we have a right. Go to your union, go to a representative and say, listen to me, this is happening, and we need to make sure that these ministries and state agencies are held accountable. So that's what I think about it.
I want to thank Roshan. There are a couple of comments that Roshan has on the chat, right? Roshan, I want to thank you for those comments. I'll just go across to Trini. Go ahead, Trini.
No, I would just want to add to what Christine is saying there. I know of a documented case, a very close friend of mine, who worked at ISCOT for almost 2.5 years. And then he worked at the Ministry of Education for 9+ years. And none of those contributions have been registered to his name. He went and he checked it at the National Insurance Board, and they told him, well, he needs to go to whoever were his employees. ISCOT does not exist anymore, so I don't know who this guy needs to go to rectify those 2.5 years of NIS contributions that were not made to the National Insurance Board. And the Ministry of Education, he went to the Ministry of Education twice and got run around, go to this office, go to that person, and go to the other person. And nobody seems to be able to regularize his national insurance contributions for almost 9.5 years at the Ministry of Education. Now, this is the government not paying the national insurance for that individual. And this is a documented case. I can get you all the particulars. And that is real.
Yeah, yes, the sad thing is that I have heard of multiple cases like that. So, I mean, as Christine would have said, please, all employees who are paying NIS contributions, it is going to be worth your time to actually go to NIB and get a record of your contributions and keep doing that to ensure that contributions are being made on your behalf. And we will be returning in our future discussions to talk about what is going on with this national insurance, because it is of critical importance to this country. And things are looking too nice right now for the NIB. So, guys, it is now 8:52, and I think there's some couple of final questions. Let me just check the chat and see. Okay, all right. So a couple of final questions. Wendy, what is in the future for the Wendy Francis Foundation?
Thanks, Lisha. Well, currently we are doing the SAVER initiative that's serving and empowering the vulnerable always. So on a weekly basis, we continue with our preparation of meals for distribution to vulnerable families, the homeless, some homes, that kind of thing. And the thing is, that is not only extended to Central region. Many persons outside of Central that reach out to me, and we make some sort of an arrangement to either drop off or pick up. That has been going on for quite some time. And not only with the food distribution, but with hampers and so forth. As mentioned before, a lot of many Good Samaritans persons seeing the need, they reach out to me so that I can extend to those that are in need. Also, the commercial entities as well would provide assistance with that regard as well. So that continues. This year, as we embark in or draw closer to the Christmas season, I'll be holding my 5th annual Christmas toy drive, extended to the Central area. That also has been supported with the good intention and support from our private citizens, as well as those commercial entities normally extend their courtesies to me as well, so that we can ensure that these kids and families, get that hope and love and joy experience. And that is usually held on Christmas Day itself. So any of you guys willing to support, and those that are viewing, you can also reach out to me if you want to be a part of this initiative, as well as any other initiatives that I have embarked on. you can contact me at 287-9908. If you go to the Wendy Francis Foundation page on Facebook as well, there is a link that you also can tap into, and you can provide the necessary information, and we can make contact there and take it from there. Apart from that, there are other initiatives that I have or would have undertaken that will continue, and those speak to education, basically overall development and improvement, empowering our youths, our single women, and those vulnerable persons. I have collaborated with several NGOs as well, including the 𝗫𝗃 Foundation, which we normally would partner and extend that service to our youths, whether it is in terms of repairs, so forth, to their devices, be it laptops or tablets and so forth, so that they can continue their online learning, facilitate whatever type of learning that they have embarked on. During the COVID-19, was heavily reliant on these communication devices so that they can access their online education. So many of these students would be taking or have been taking extra learning initiatives, whether it's lessons and so forth. So they utilize these commercial devices as well, communication devices, sorry. So that also will continue. Earlier this year, I would have launched a period poverty initiative targeting our youths of vulnerable young girls, single women, that type of thing. And I was happy to see recently Parliament would have issued some sort of information regarding data collection with regards to that. I know general population in Trinidad is more like, it's treated like as though it's a topic of taboo in nature, that you don't want to talk and come out in something that's embarrassing. But the truth and fact of the matter is that our maturity rates, our young girls, our single parents, our single mothers, this is a real issue. And this is one of the things that came out of not only during the COVID-19 period, but I see it on a daily basis where persons reach out, they are asking for these type of items, whether it's sanitary and those feminine care products. I believe this is something that we really need to place emphasis on. And I'm happy, as I mentioned before, that the Parliament is actually now acknowledging that. And I hope in the near future that's something that they would definitely invest in, because not only that, but the education about that, for it to be implemented into our schools, our primary school system and our secondary school system as well. That is something that is born by nature in terms of your menstrual cycle. This is something that the population needs to be educated on. Not only our girls, but also our males as well, so that they can understand how this affects our females in our society as well. And providing the items that to those that need them is very important as well. So my work towards period poverty also continues. I hope that will continue to grow in a larger way as well. As it is, I've also reached persons reach out to me, also not only our local community, but even the immigrants, as mentioned before. We have a lot of kids that are not enrolled in school or being accepted for education, not general education in the school system. So this also affects them as well. So there are many factors to take into consideration. So as we move forward into the closing of 23 and going into 2024, I would say there's a lot more to look forward for and the Wendy Francis Foundation. And coupled with that, I'd like to see the government also aid the general community and population as well. So, and in closing of 𝗏𝐿𝐴, to mention, I don't think the general population is in consensus with the implementation, with the increases of property tax and the power rates and so forth. So they also need to take into consideration all these given factors as mentioned before. And just to touch very briefly, because I know time is limited, with the means test, I think that is something that is so much of a barrier, because with all the incentives that they talk about, that they are providing an opportunity for our population. Many citizens or many persons from the population cannot access those with this means test because it's very difficult to get even or to capitalize or receive any of these grants or incentives. So I think that those things should be revisited. Thank you, Leisha. Thank you for having me on the program, and thank you everyone, Christine and everyone viewing.
Wendy, I want to sincerely congratulate you and all at the Wendy Francis Foundation. And I want to vouch for the foundation. They do excellent work. Wendy spoke about the period poverty initiative they had. Also, she does a lot of training courses and food support. So anyone willing to assist, please feel free to reach out to Wendy. You could always leave a message on our chats and I will be able to pass on the information for her. So Gary, I see you have your hand up, so we can probably take a comment for you from you, and then one final question for Christine. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, you guys hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I was speaking about, during the COVID time when, citizens were locked down and, there was a need for hampers. There was a lot of discrimination brought to my attention in the distribution of hampers and food cards and stuff like that. And, it's something that we have to be very concerned of because citizens wasn't being treated equally. So the things that Wendy is doing, we want to encourage people to, to try and support as much as they can, Wendy and whoever else is doing out there to support this kind of organization, in the best way that they can, because we're still dealing with situations where people are discriminated against in getting assistance. So I just wanted to raise that, All right, thank you.
Okay, Gary, thank you. So Christine, I think this is a great question for us to end off with. What are some of your major accomplishments as Minister of the People and Social Development? And how would you compare the performance of the ministry now as opposed to when you were the minister?
Well, there were several accomplishments, but I would like to speak about just one. It's going to be a little bit long. Regrettably, Lisha, when you get into government, ministers and ministries function in silos, separate and apart from each other. And for me, when I came in, I recognize that when you're formulating policy, regardless of who your beneficiaries are, you need to know who your stakeholders, who are your stakeholders, because their stakeholders is what ensures that your policy will in fact be equitable. It will be effective, because you want to be able to have a ministry that is effective, particularly when you have the Ministry of the People and Social Development. So one of the things that I did was to look at what were the issues are in the ministry. And I looked at the various ministries that should be involved in a partnership with the Ministry of the People and Social Development. The first one that took number one was Ministry of National Security, because when you deal with socially displaced persons and who we call homeless, Ministry of National Security helps in that regard because of the security that would have to go out onto the street or take to the court system. You look at the prisoners who are coming out, so that national security, helps in that regard, so they could alert you as to who is coming out and how the ministry could assist in terms of providing assistance, providing whatever care that may be necessary. And of course, you'll never believe this, but pensioners must get a letter from the Ministry of National Security ensuring that they have not lived out or they have not traveled too often. All these things really hinder a pensioner from accessing. So what I did was I had meetings with the Minister of National Security to ensure that, that there was a symbiotic relationship between us, so that when we needed information, that it would have a quick, easy flow of information, as opposed to having persons go wrong, the system and being lost in it. We also would have partnered with the Ministry of Education, because you would find that when you want to transform a nation, you want to do a national transformation, you have to look at the most vulnerable, and sometimes where they have failed would be in their education. So when you look at the Ministry of Education, coupled with the Ministry of Tertiary Education, we were able to look at programs, particularly with 𝗲𝗲. 𝗲𝗲 is dynamic with that in terms of coming up with programs to certify persons who would have done courses, whether it's in plumbing or masonry or whatever it is, so that they were not only did their training out, but they would have been certified so that they would have been able to go out there and to become, gainfully employed. We would have partnered with the Ministry of Trade and with other ministries, so that what we did is that as a Ministry of the People and Social Development, we came together with all the partners, all the ministries, because all of the ministries would impact with us, we would impact on them, and brought together in the process of developing a policy where we would have been able to look at the various areas where we could ensure that there would have been policy developed that would have brought about national transformation, because we did not want people to remain in poverty. We wanted people to be we didn't want them to get just get a handout, but we wanted them to get a hand up, so that even some persons could have been entrepreneurs, regardless of the fact that you were you did not have an education, because a lot of people are streetwise. They know how to do certain things, whether they're good with their hands or they're good with whatever it is, whether it's cooking, as Wendy alluded to, with the bacon. So it was really to help persons really come out of poverty and to be able to have the various ministries in place to be able to provide the support system. So I think for me, it would have been background. I know that Gary said that he heard a lot, and you said, Alicia, but that is what I believe made the ministry effective. And I'm very proud of that.
And this is a wonderful way to end the program. And I particularly like when you said not a handout, but a hand up. And I've always believed that to improve Trinidad and Tobago, we need to uplift the people, uplift the people, uplift the people. So I want to ask now, are there any closing remarks at all from Wendy or Christine?
Alicia, thank you very much. I just want to say that the programs and the initiatives that we are running, I want to extend congratulations to two youths in particular, Shivanan Maraj and Samantha Juman. Both have capitalized on how to set up your own baking business and humanitarian aid initiatives, joining me. And they would have received National Youth Awards earlier, I believe was last month, or earlier this month in October, where they received National Youth Awards for their contribution and their entrepreneurship initiatives coming out of that. So congratulations and kudos to those two youths. I must say that I feel overwhelmed and overjoyed knowing that persons take away and build themselves and empower themselves and continue to do so based on the initiatives that I have undertaken under the Wendy Francis Foundation. And we are seeing some improvements. So thank you all for your support and making these dreams a reality. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So, well, on that note, I mean, I really want to thank everyone who attended the session this evening. There were some of us on Zoom, social media, and a lot of people actually do look at the program after the live. So we spoke about a lot of things, and the program certainly didn't disappoint me. In fact, I'm really hoping that both these ladies will join us on a more regular basis, because we are going to run a series on developing the social sector. And we spoke about a lot of things. We spoke about the minimum wage, we spoke about the market box program, the book grant, food support, the high cost of food, unemployment, agriculture and the role that agriculture plays in reducing food prices, food security. We spoke a lot about the NIS, which we will return to. And I particularly liked hearing about Wendy's projects. Again, I urge anyone who's interested to please reach out and support her and the Wendy Francis Foundation. And Christine, there are at least 2 phrases that I will take with me from you tonight. One is the working poor, which I will do a little bit more research on. I find that fascinating. You're working, but you're still poor.
Yeah.
And not a handout, but a hand up. And I love that. Right. So I just want to say thank you all very much, Mrs. Christine 𝗂𝗲𝘀 former Member of Parliament and Minister of People and Social Development, and Wendy Francis, President of the Wendy Francis Foundation. So guys, on that note, I will just say good night and see you all again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of One on One.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.